disobedience is sort of a very still relatively new concept and idea for Hong Kong people.
It is, yeah.
They got used to pure obedience instead of...
That's right. Yeah, and other cultures, they look at what's happening in the Chinese culture, and they often say that the Chinese people are too obedient, and in many ways it is true actually, and it's and hopefully. I'm trying to shake things up a bit and get people thinking about it, that sometimes you've got to stand up for your rights and so on, and be willing to challenge the government. But there we go. So we want to move on and talk a bit about another issue, don't we, to do with Ronnie Tong and the Civic Party, because that's another interesting little incident as well, isn't it?
It turns out the Civic Party, the name pops up quite a few times today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's interesting actually, that he's stuck his neck out, and it's not often you see that in the Civic Party actually. He's publicly said that he doesn't support the idea of the mass resignation campaign to do with the universal in terms of as a strategy to campaign for universal suffrage. What's your take on that, and what do you think he's thinking on that?
Of course, people were wondering whether this is only a rhetoric or whatever. I mean, after all, you do have the Civic Party already hosting a press conference saying very clearly that they would go for the mass resignation. I mean, in stages. First of all, either one in each riding, or at the end of the day, if there's no improvement, no advances, or the chief executive has no response at all, there would be mass resignation, the real mass resignation of 23 legislators. Doing so. Oh, not 23, because you do have some refusing to do so, like Frederick Fung or those people. But I mean, Ronnie Tong, you can see that he mentioned quite clearly that right from the very beginning he disliked the idea, and then this is something very unwise, and this did not go with the philosophy, his philosophy when he first joined the Civic Party. But it seems that O.G. Yu, the leader of the party, doesn't really give any thought about that. I mean, she seemed very fine, and said it's normal to have different opinions in the party.
Her face looked not very good. But I mean, politically, she didn't say anything. So I just always say that, like from the election last year, and when Raymond Wong was facing the Civic Party's one of candidate Claudia Mo, and there's a very famous slang within LSD that Ronnie Tong is not representing Civic Party. So Matt, do you think one of the lawmaker speech should be, like you should talk with your party first before you speak any personal opinions, and the personal opinions exposed on the media is not representing the party. So should the party sack him?
Yeah,
or kick him
that
out?
is a very good question, and I think constantly within all political groups, exactly that goes on actually, and. Ronnie Tong, he's a clever guy, let's face it, isn't he? He's a lawyer and so on. He wouldn't just say something rashly. He would have thought about it, and he would have thought about it in quite a lot of detail actually before he came out and said what he said actually. I would say, each political figure with each group, that there are certain issues which definitely they cannot go along with. And obviously for him, this was something he felt really strongly about, and he just couldn't go along with it. And in some ways, good for him. I don't necessarily agree with his opinion. In fact, I don't agree with him. But I would say to him, in some way, I do respect him for willing to speak out. If he genuinely doesn't agree with that policy, then speak out and say so, and let's have some debate debate, and I would say, to other people with other legislators, you've got to persuade him and get him to understand why he's got to change his view.
Yeah, but Ronnie Tong's version of the story is a bit different, though, because he mentioned that he originally didn't want to speak up. It's just that he didn't want to give the impression of a rift among the pan-Democrats over the resignation plan, and he said he had to speak up only after someone leaked his views after the pan-Democrats closed-door meeting. But he said that if he can't help the public by working in the establishment, what's the point of setting up a political party? He just have to attend a few protests.
Yeah.
So that's his idea. So,
Yeah, because obviously he would say that he was elected by people, and he feels that he's got to represent them and continue to do so until the end of his term. But I mean, to me, in some ways, to what extent is there a little bit of a snobbery? Because the civic, a lot of the members of the Civic Party can be a bit,
blue blood,
they think they're above the rest of us and so on. To what extent? Because obviously this idea about this plan, the strategy about mass resignation, it actually came from the League of Social Democrats, didn't it? To what extent, because this idea came from the League of Social Democrats, is that the reason perhaps why he, for some reason, doesn't want to get involved or put his name to it?
I mean, meantime, you do have the LSD being criticized as dividing the pan-Democrat camp. So, I mean, without the LSD, people used to say the pan-Democrats would be more, would enjoy a stronger solidarity. But I mean, after all, I think it's very interesting to see that you're right. The Civic Party has always been criticized as too elitist. And Mandy Tam mentioned that might be one of the reasons why she left the party, because they're not doing enough groundwork with the grassroots. But whether with or without LSD, whether the pan-Democrats would be divided on this issue, that's another story. But LSD, you would never imagine such a strong impact from the LSD when it's first established, that it has such a power, including so-called dividing the pan-Democrat camp.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I never would have thought, when I, joined 2 years ago when it first started, that they would be having the influence they have at the moment, I think. And obviously, sometimes within LSD, there can be arguments and internal politics going on. But I think you certainly can't underestimate that they are having some influence.
But I understand why, because like Raymond, when he was on a commercial radio from like 15 years ago, he keep talking that saying that the Democratic Party people, lawmakers should resign, and keep saying that for like 15 years. And I believe that many radio audience did affect by Raymond, and now he become a lawmaker, and he fulfill his dream.
Yeah. Oh, before we go, maybe just ask you one very quick question. Since there's so many English language speakers in the Civic Party, have you for a moment before thought about joining the Civic Party?
I thought about it, but for about 5 seconds, and I thought there's no way I'm joining those guys and that group.
You can be Bluebird now.
Yeah, because actually you'll be interested to know. Actually, in terms of my background, I from quite a middle class kind of background from England, and obviously went to university and stuff, and came from quite a good background. In some ways from Civic Party type of background actually, but I realise that once you get to university, you can't really justify actually sort of an elitist political views. And obviously, yes, they're big on democracy and so on, but at the end of the day, I would say they've got a severe problem in terms of being a highly elitist political organisation, which is living in a bit of a dream world in many ways, I think, in terms of because obviously in a political group you've got to be genuinely willing to treat people equally and treat people on the same level, and unfortunately a lot of the people in the Civic Party are think they're higher than the rest of us and looking down and so on, and in politics I think that's totally the wrong approach.
And an hour flew by very, very quickly. I think
that's time, is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Feels like only half an hour, right?
It is.
When they talk for an hour.
Right. Yeah. Well,
that's the joy of speaking to us, man.
Yep. Looking forward to speaking to you again in a month or 2 months time.
Yes.
A month or 2 months time.
Yep.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks, won't we?
And 2 weeks later, on the 21st of October.
And
the show will come out on the 22nd of October.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you then.
See you.
See you. Bye.